The Gaza Strip, a place synonymous with conflict, a place where the echoes of bombs and the cries of families are tragically commonplace. Once again, the issue of civilian casualties in Gaza is thrust onto the global stage. The world watches, horrified as the human cost of this conflict continues to spiral. But is this time different? Are we finally ready to confront the uncomfortable truths behind the euphemism of collateral damage? The New York Times, a publication often seen as a beacon of journalistic integrity, recently published an article on Israeli military operations in Gaza. The article claimed to expose a shocking truth. The Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, have adopted a policy that accepts high civilian casualties as an unfortunate but necessary consequence of their actions. The report suggests that for every low-level Hamas target, the IDF is willing to accept the deaths of multiple innocent civilians. This revelation, if true, is deeply troubling. It suggests a callous disregard for human life, a willingness to sacrifice innocent men, women, and children on the altar of military expediency. The article went on to state that the IDF has since tightened its rules of engagement, reducing the acceptable number of civilian casualties. This, they claim, is evidence of a newfound commitment to minimizing civilian harm. However, a very different picture emerges when we compare the New York Times article to earlier reports from Plus 972 magazine. This Israeli publication, known for its critical investigative journalism, paints a far more disturbing picture of the IDF's actions in Gaza. Plus 972 magazine reports that the IDF authorized the killing of up to 100 civilians in a single airstrike targeting a Hamas commander. In another instance, they claim the IDF was willing to accept the deaths of 300 civilians to eliminate another high-value target. These figures are staggering. They suggest that the IDF's acceptance of civilian casualties is not a recent development, nor is it limited to a handful of isolated incidents. It appears to be a deeply ingrained policy, one that has been in place for far longer than the New York Times article suggests. This raises serious questions about the accuracy and completeness of the Times reporting. The New York Times article attempts to portray the IDF's current acceptance of civilian casualties as an anomaly, an unprecedented departure from their past conduct. However, this narrative crumbles upon closer examination. Plus 972 magazine, citing historical data, reveals that the IDF has a long and troubling history of accepting high civilian casualties in their operations. They point to numerous examples, dating back decades, where the IDF has shown a willingness to inflict mass civilian casualties in pursuit of their military objectives. The current situation in Gaza is not an aberration. It is a continuation of a deeply concerning pattern of behavior. The IDF's claims of adhering to international law and minimizing civilian harm ring hollow in the face of this overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Section 5. Counting the cost discrepancies in death tolls. The true human cost of this conflict is difficult to quantify. The fog of war, coupled with conflicting narratives and deliberate obfuscation, makes it challenging to establish an accurate death toll. However, even the most conservative estimates are deeply troubling. The United Nations reports that nearly 46,000 people have been killed in Gaza, with thousands more still missing and presumed dead. These figures stand in stark contrast to the IDF's official reports, which claim to have killed a far smaller number of Hamas militants. The discrepancy between these figures suggests that the true number of civilian casualties is far higher than the IDF is willing to admit. This raises serious concerns about the IDF's commitment to transparency and accountability. It also underscores the urgent need for an independent investigation into the true human cost of this conflict. Section 6. The ethical abyss, justifying the unjustifiable. The IDF's justification for accepting high civilian casualties rests on the argument that it is an unavoidable consequence of waging war against a terrorist organization like Hamas. They argue that Hamas deliberately embeds itself within the civilian population, using them as human shields. While it is true that Hamas bears responsibility for its actions, this argument cannot be used to absolve the IDF of its own moral and legal obligations. International humanitarian law is clear: civilians cannot be targeted, and all feasible precautions must be taken to minimize civilian harm. The principle of proportionality must also be observed, meaning that the anticipated military advantage gained from an attack must outweigh the potential harm to civilians. The IDF's actions in Gaza, as reported by both the New York Times and Plus 972 magazine, suggest a blatant disregard for these fundamental principles. Section 7. AI warfare, precision or peril. Adding another layer of complexity to this already fraught situation is the IDF's increasing reliance on artificial intelligence, or AI, in warfare. The IDF claims that their AI systems, such as the Lavender AI system, enable them to conduct highly precise strikes, minimizing civilian casualties. However, Plus 972 magazine's investigation reveals a far more troubling reality. Their report suggests that the Lavender AI system is prone to errors, generating targets with questionable accuracy. Furthermore, the human verification process for these AI-generated targets is woefully inadequate. Plus, 972 magazine reports that in some cases soldiers are given as little as 20 seconds to confirm a target's identity and military status. This raises serious concerns about the potential for misidentification and the increased risk of civilian harm. Section 8. Selective reporting: what the Times left unsaid. While the New York Times article does shed some light on the IDF's controversial policies in Gaza, it also contains glaring omissions. The article fails to mention numerous alleged atrocities committed by the IDF, including the killing of civilians who posed no military threat, mass torture, sexual abuse, and the widespread demolition of civilian homes. These omissions paint an incomplete and arguably sanitized picture of the conflict. They serve to downplay the severity of the situation and shield the IDF from full accountability for its actions. The New York Times decision to omit these crucial details raises serious questions about their editorial judgment and their commitment to providing a comprehensive and unbiased account of the conflict. Section 9. Demanding accountability: a call for justice. The situation in Gaza demands our attention. We cannot allow the fog of war and the euphemisms of collateral damage to obscure the human cost of this conflict. The IDF's actions, as reported by both the New York Times and Plus 972 magazine, raise profound ethical and legal questions. The international community must demand a full and independent investigation into the IDF's conduct in Gaza. Those responsible for war crimes and crimes against humanity must be held accountable. We cannot allow the people of Gaza to suffer in silence. We must amplify their voices, demand justice for the victims, and work towards a future where the horrors of this conflict are not repeated. The time for empty words and hollow condemnations is over. The time for action is now.